Hey everyone, it's Clint. I might be a little late to the party, but honestly, when any of these updates happen from this lawsuit, I look at it and I don't really know what to make of it. I'll let you decide. We can internet lawyer this thing together. First off, I better let you know though that Downcast Rise and Fall only has 5 days left. We've already passed the first campaign's initial, pull, I guess, dollar pull. So if you haven't backed it yet, please check it out. It's in the link in the description below, and there's only 5 days left. Thank you very much. All right, so I have strong opinions on this. Strong enough opinions on this that I started a YouTube channel to talk about comics and all of this. I know how difficult it is to get a publishing contract with a publisher, even a small press publisher. It's very difficult. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm fortunate. It was a lot of hard work, but I am fortunate that it worked out, and I'm going to be getting published through Alterna Comics. I'm really happy about that. When I see that somebody had a publishing contract, it was interfered with, allegedly, that is upsetting to me. All right. So I keep seeing people say, after so much time has passed, like, who cares? I tell you, Richard Meyer cares. I think there are a lot of people that care. They want to be able to do business in comics wherever they want, without some kind of shadowy cabal deciding who gets to be published and who doesn't get to be published. So this came out in Bleeding Cool, and basically, to sum it up, what happened over the weekend, I guess this was the 15th, is that a court ruled that there was jurisdiction in Texas for the case. It's been going on for over a year now, just to decide where this was going to be tried, or if there was any jurisdiction in Texas, which, Texas is where the contract was. It's where Richard Meyer lived, and it's also where Antarctic Press lives. So to me, it only makes sense that is where, well, what do I know? Okay, so another point here too is the defamation stuff. Basically, Meyer's team said that the defamation that Mark Waid did on Twitter would count, and the judge said, no, it shall not count. So basically, any defamation that happened on Twitter is not going to be tried in this case. However, any defamation that Mark Waid spewed in person at a convention on a panel in Texas is going to be included in this case. At least that is my understanding. And of course, the tortious interference is also going to be on trial. Now, to me, the interference is the big thing. The defamation is, I don't know, something added to it. All I know is that defamation is tough. Like, that is a tough nut to crack. But I did look into, a little bit with tortious interference, which is also a tough nut to crack. And so I want to show you some of the things that I learned.
Mr. Charles, when was the last time that you were intimate with Ms. Jackson?
This morning.
Miss Jackson.
All right, so I found this was interesting. It's kind of nice to take a step back and look at what is tortious interference at face value rather than for this specific case. So I don't know if anything is different from Virginia versus Texas. I have no idea. But I didn't think about this before, and generally when tortious interference with a contract comes up, usually it's between an employer and an employee. I found that fascinating. So if you get hired by a company and then somebody else calls that employer to try and get you fired from that job, that could be a claim for tortious interference with a contract. But it's very, very difficult to prove because there are two parties involved, and both parties could end the contract at any point in time. Either the employee could quit or the employer could fire them. That's the end of it. This is interesting because in our case with Richard Meyer, there is actually a contract. It's a publishing deal. It's not being hired for a job to work somewhere. It's a little bit different. Another thing that this article pointed out was that there's no hard definition for improper methods, and improper methods is one of those magical lawyer terms, legal terms that come up that mean something else. Essentially, there's a lot of things attached to that. And so if there's an improper method to get someone fired, that is a whole other thing. If getting somebody fired was done in a proper way, then it wouldn't meet the improper method standard. So things that would include improper methods are actions that are illegal or independently tortious. I have no idea what independently tortious means, so there's that. Violations of an established standard of trade. The thing is, in the comic book industry, I think I could make an argument that it is it's a standard establishment of trade for if you are going to get published, you get published. Nobody else is involved in that. You don't consult somebody at Marvel, that's doing work for Marvel to come over and decide who you should and should not be publishing based on Twitter defamation. Really, like if you boil this down, the court threw out Twitter defamation as a thing for Richard Meyer's case, but at the same time, Twitter defamation is being used as a reason to interfere with this contract. Fraud or deceit, I think that's where the defamation claims come up. Unethical conduct, okay, you can make an argument there. Sharp dealing, I have no idea what that even means, but okay, sounds great. If you brought a knife, maybe? Is that sharp dealing? You brought a knife?
I don't remember what happened next. All I remember is everybody told me I just went completely berserk on the guy. I didn't punch him. I just was screaming at him so loud. All I remember is going back to my office and punching a hole in the wall. Who does that? What kind of monster does that?
Overreaching? Yeah, sure, most certainly. And then last and not least, actions that fall outside the acceptable practice of the rough and tumble world of free market competition. I've never heard it spoken that way. The thing is, doesn't have anything to do with competition. Is Mark Waid really worried about Jawbreakers being published through bookstores because of the competition? That's a nice thought, but really, I mean, that's not what was pushing it. It was personal. I mean, in every way that you look at it, all of this comes down to personal conflict. And personal conflict, that's a whole other matter. This is the problem with social media. I feel like this keeps coming up over and over and over again. If two people have a personal conflict, does that mean that one or the other should never work in comics again? Does it? Personal conflicts should remain as personal conflicts. All right, so this went over a case in which some physical therapist was working for two different people, two different companies, doing part-time jobs, part-time work, got fired from the one, and because he or she, the person was fired from the first job, they responded back to the person that fired them and say, hey, what's the deal, or something like that. There's not very many details. And then the first employer sent it to the second employer to show them their response, and then the second employer also fired the first one. So I'd want to see that response to know exactly what was said, but this person was totally left out in the cold, and the court sided against the plaintiff for tortious interference because there wasn't enough evidence to go on. Basically, all you had is the one text message, and it was considered part of this rough and tumble nature of capitalism. Let's see. The allegations in this particular case, the court held, were insufficient to constitute improper methods. So depending on what those improper methods are, and again, you have to have more proof. Ultimately, I think for me, it comes down to the bigger thing for me is I can't find the terminology. What is something that's a standard, falls outside of acceptable practices, violates an established standard of trade? The established standard of trade in the comic book industry should absolutely be that your personal conflicts, especially on social media, because there's too much nonsense on social media for that to be ruling what happens as far as business goes. This is something we have to be able to agree on. Complain about people's books. You can not like their books. You can be jealous if you want to be jealous. You can, there's all these things that you can do, but preventing somebody from making money or from having some kind of a working relationship because of your own personal conflicts, that should be outside, no matter what happens here, that should be outside the acceptable norm. Needless to say, this is expensive. I went and took a look at these are the funds raised, the GoFundMe. We've got one for Richard Meyer and also one for Mark Waid. So I know that this has taken a lot of money and it's going to take more money. I plan to donate to this, just my personal opinion. I think it's a good idea if you consider it as well, because it's going to take a very long time. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know that's not a ton to update on, and there's probably a lot more behind it. I'd be interested to hear someone like Nick or Caden, what he has to say about all this. And how long will this go on? I don't know if there's a court date. That's where I really feel like if they start getting into the evidence of a case, that would be interesting. The other thing is I have not seen a judge actually throw this out of court, and I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign, or if, I have no idea. Regardless, there's still acceptable standards, practices that should happen in comics, and who gets to decide that Everyone gets to decide that by having some kind of boundaries. So don't forget to check out Downcast Rise and Fall. There's only 5 days left. It's in the link in the description below, and I will see you next time.